How's everyone today? I'm anti-woke and autistic. I want to talk about all the people out there who believe it's fair for biological men who identify as female or biological boys who identify as girls to compete with biological females in sports. Their argument has two major flaws that, for some reason, don't get discussed a whole lot. Well, I'm going to discuss them. The first flaw is their argument is that the vast majority of trans women or trans girls aren't any better than biological females. And so that's why it's fair. There's they're not much better or they're not any better. There's been no proof supposedly that they're overrunning women's or girls' sports. What they don't realize is that whether one out of three trans women or trans girls beats out a biological female, or whether it's one out of 100 or one out of 5,000 or one out of 10,000, that doesn't matter to the biological female who was bumped from a team or did not get a scholarship because a biological male got that position. It doesn't matter if it's an extreme minority of trans females who are better than biological females, even if that happens only one out of a million cases, because for that one hardworking biological female who has worked so hard, who has worked her butt off to excel in her sport, and she gets bumped or eliminated from the podium. That's crushing to her. And if it's just one out of a million female athletes that happens to, that's one out of a million, way too much. So we shouldn't be getting this. I don't want to hear this argument that, well, it's very rare for trans men to actually perform better than trans women. Really? You really think that if more and more trans men get into weightlifting, the discus throw, shot put, track and field, especially sprints, let's see, what else here? The javelin, high jump, judo, boxing. Do you really think it's going to be rare for trans males to perform better and beat the pants off of their female opponents? And what about taking somebody's spot on a volleyball or basketball team? What about the unfairness of that? Somebody doesn't get on a volleyball team or a soccer team because a biological male got on. It's bodies against bodies. It should be bodies against bodies, not identities against identities. Where do you draw the line? Now let's take a look at LeBron James. Let's suppose one day LeBron James, with all his muscle and power and strength, he's like 6'10, he's 250. Suppose one day he announces, well, all his life he's felt like a female, a woman trapped in a man's body, and he decides to come out and identify as a woman, and he gets on the WNBA. Well, one of the issues to consider when it comes to biological males competing on the same team as a bunch of women is the risk of injury to those women. Now, in basketball, there's a lot of collisions. People get knocked down all the time. And if somebody built like LeBron James crashes into a biological female on the basketball court, she can get really injured. Now, before you say, well, have you ever seen those WNBA players? They're pretty big themselves. They're pretty tough. Well, yeah, they're tough, they're aggressive. The game requires a lot of grit and iron. But when we take a 6'5" biological female basketball player who might weigh 180, 170, and you pit that against LeBron James at 6'10 and 250, and it's not just a difference in size, it's a difference in body composition. I mean, LeBron James, look at his muscles. This guy is solid muscle. And if he crashes into a WNBA player, no matter how tough you think that woman is, she can get injured. Now, what if a lot of NBA players start identifying as female? Now you're going to have women's basketball teams that are 50%, 70% male, biological male. If this trend of allowing biological men to compete on or to participate on women's teams and and compete against biological women, if that trend continues, if that path continues, then eventually trans men are going to overrun women's sports, and you're no longer going to have predominantly biological women's teams. You're going to have a bunch of biological men on them, and that is not fair. Now, the second consideration, the second flaw in their argument is that, well, there's just such a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of trans females playing in women's sports that it really doesn't make a difference. Well, right now, maybe collectively overall, it doesn't make a difference. But remember, it makes a difference to that individual specific woman who was bumped or eliminated from the podium. But as far as overall, it might not be making a big dent right now. But if this trend, if this circus continues in 10 years, 15 years, for sure 20 years, within a generation from now, women's teams are going to be composed of 50% biological males. Can you, or maybe 100%, who knows? Can you imagine the Olympic female volleyball team being all men? Well, you might think, well, for sure they'll win. Well, what about all the biological female players who couldn't make the cut because all these men were beating them? Now, you might be thinking, well, have you seen elite female athletes? They're as big and as muscular as men. No, overall, they're not. They can't hold a candle to a man. Yeah, I mean, do you really believe biological women are at the same level as biological men in sports such as judo, MMA, kickboxing, track and field, basketball, volleyball, discus throw, shot put, weightlifting, powerlifting, marathon running? The distance between elite or the time distance between elite marathon runners, 26 miles, and runners who are biologically female. So the male and female, the distance or the difference in time is, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's considerable. When the first men cross the finish line of the Boston Marathon or the New York Marathon, the women aren't exactly right behind them. It's a while before the first woman comes into sight. It's a pretty good chunk of time before the first woman, the woman who's leading the pack, the first woman actually crosses the line. There's a big disparity. There's a big difference there. It isn't just about testosterone. Let's say LeBron James decides to go on a hormone regimen for the next 12 months, or somebody who's similar to him as far as strength, size, power, skill. And for 12 months, they undergo treatment, gender affirming care, whatever you want to call it. Do you really think that after 12 months, LeBron James is going to look a whole lot different than that? Do you really think he's going to look like a WNBA player? No, he's pretty much going to still look like that. There might be a little shift in body composition, maybe a little less muscle mass, a little more body fat. But guess what? He's still going to have an arm span of like 7 feet 4 inches, whatever it is. He's still going to have large hands, much bigger than women who are his height. Men in general have bigger hands than women of the same height. Testosterone, taking suppressants for testosterone and other hormone treatments for transgenderism isn't going to change the size of his hands and make them like a woman's hands who's the same height. Hormone treatments will not affect the size of his heart. He's still going to have a heart that's bigger than women his size, his height. He's still going to have greater lung capacity, bigger lungs. He's going to have more blood vessels. His body's going to clear lactic acid a lot quicker. He's going to have denser bones still. And you know something? What about body proportions or anthropometrics? Men the same height as women, overall, there are exceptions, but overall, men are proportioned differently. They have a smaller or a lower center of gravity. And as mentioned, they do have a larger arm span. They have bigger feet. I mean, they're just built differently, and it doesn't all come down to testosterone. If we continue on this wokey nonsense of biological men competing on women's teams, over time, the number or the percentage of women's teams that are composed, the percentage of men on those teams is going to rise. It's going to increase, and then it is going to make a huge difference, a huge impact overall. Plus, there's going to be injuries in sports where there's collisions. Basketball, volleyball, even track. You get a pack of runners for the 3,000-meter run, and they're all in a pack. Oh, you know what sport where there's a lot of collisions? It's short track, winter short track. Ever see short track in the Winter Olympics? They're always colliding into each other. And speed skating, can you imagine a couple men among the women for short track? I mean, it's just potentially dangerous. Please, 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 if you're a biological female and you're sick and tired of this woke nonsense of men competing on women's teams, speak up. You'll be a hero. Don't worry about your speaking up or your opinions preventing you from getting your dream job after you graduate from college if you're a college athlete. If you're a college athlete, and some company doesn't want to hire you because you spoke up about this woke nonsense, you spoke up about it, you don't want to work for a company like that. You don't want to work for a company like that, not at all. There is a company out there that would see you as a hero, as a warrior, as a pioneer, and they would grab you in a second. Please, women, why is there only one Riley Gaines? There's a few other women who have been very vocal about all of this nonsense, but it's like Riley Gaines is the only one. Speak up, people, even if it's high school. This is America, it's a free country. You have a right to speak up. Can you imagine NBA players competing on the same team as a woman who looks like this? Certainly she's very tall and she's toned, but come on, she could be crushed on the court by men. Now, before you say, well, have you ever seen some other women? I mean, some of them are built like men. Let me see here. All right, so here's a female shot putter. She's built like a woman. I don't care how strong she is. I don't care how much she can lift in the gym. If I didn't see her face, and if she were wearing some clothes covering her stomach, and I didn't see her face, I would know immediately that's a woman. Yeah, I can see the muscles in her. I can see some training going on, but she's still composed like a woman. Now, a male shot putter, look at the difference. He's kind of on the slender side for a male shot putter, but if you ever take a look at male shot putters in general, they're stockier, but they are not built like that. Not at all. All right, so that's it for today. Once again, women, you've got to speak up and fight against this. Please don't let women's sports go extinct. That's a real possibility. Women have worked too hard, parents have done too much for their daughters. Coaches have done too much for their female athletes to let it then all go up in smoke just because of wokeness. Have a good day.